Hi, everyone. Welcome to the BizDev Podcast, the podcast about developing your business. I'm David Baxter, your host, and I'm joined today by Gary Voigt, who, little did you know, underneath the thousands of plastic flamingos that surround Gary's trailer, he has a cheese cave. So how is it like growing cheese in the bottom of a cave in a Florida trailer park?
Cheese cave. I thought you said cheesecake. I love
No,
cheesecake.
that would be gross.
But
Cheese cave. Go with it, Gary. Go with it.
yeah, sure. So I produce cheese wheels. You can't have a cave in Florida. No one's gonna buy this.
No one's going to buy it? Well, they did buy the flamingos. That's all I know. All right. No, more importantly, we are joined by Linda Beneze. She has been a CEO, a CRO, and every other C you can imagine for the last 15 years. She has been kind enough to join us. How are you, Linda? Thank you for coming.
I'm great, David. How are both of you?
I cannot complain. It's beautiful today. So, yay. So I wanted to start off today. I wanted to continue the conversation that I've had the last few weeks with our guests about leadership. You've done all the roles, and I think that it's a really good question to throw over to you. When I say leadership, what does that mean to you?
Well, leadership to me is having a really good team that you are able to bring out all of their strengths to work in concert together and to support them and enable them to be as creative and productive as they were meant to be.
Nice. So practically speaking, what does that mean? Like on a day-to-day, how do you accomplish those leadership goals in a practical manner? Is that a lot of meetings? Is that a lot of nice emails? Is it what is it that gives you your practical side of being a leader?
So I think setting an environment that makes it easy for all of the team to interact is important. So I do typically do a weekly meeting with my team, and I will also do on a weekly basis one-on-ones with all of my team. And communication really is the key to get the entire organization to buy in. So I would typically have, depending on the size of the organization, either a monthly or a quarterly type meeting with all employees. So in my larger organizations where I've had, 1,200 people responsibility, then I would end up usually doing a quarterly update. But in my smaller startups, I would typically do a monthly meeting with all the employees.
How big of a company were you as a CEO? I'm following up with a question on this based on that. Was it a big company, a little company?
So most of my startups have been, I think, average size around 50 employees.
Okay.
And when I was president and general manager at Teleflex, I had $300 million in revenue and 1,200 people and several different manufacturing facilities, several different business unit locations that I would need to go around and that's why I think communication is key, is because if you don't sort of set the messaging and communicate what's going on and achievements and things that we are, people, when they're in their own little world, they know what they're achieving. But if they don't see it connecting to a broader picture, they don't feel fulfilled, I don't think. So I think it's important to communicate all the achievements of the organization as a result of what the individuals are doing on a day-to-day basis.
Well said. Well said. The reason I asked the size question is, so our company is 11 people, and the weight of that, even though a tiny company, the weight of that sits on me pretty squarely. And I've always wondered, when you're managing and you're responsible for CEO, very high up in the chain, and you are responsible for 1,200 plus people, how does that not just cripple you? like mentally. I mean, that's always it blows my mind because to me, 10 is hard, 11 is hard. I can't imagine an order of magnitude or 10 orders bigger than that. How do you not stress yourself out?
Well, I think that if you build good culture, really, and you develop people, then those people become the spokes in the wheel that, multiply what your efforts are. So I don't really feel any more stress from a big organization than I do from a small organization. I think
Hmm.
um, it just scales. When you have the right people and are they are enabled and um, allowed to fail, then they're not afraid to fail and they go out and do things that will help build the business in a very productive way. I think if you cripple them and you don't allow them to fail, then everything will drop to you because they're afraid to fail, so they don't do anything.
That's interesting. I mean, I think the way that you're describing it, I don't think I've heard described that way, and I like it, is that as a small company and the small founders, most of the people who listen to our show are aspiring entrepreneurs or new at it, and they feel that pressure because they're in control. And I think what you're describing is you don't feel that stress because you are delegating to the point and you're empowering the people below you so that that stress is no longer yours. Is that an accurate summation?
Yeah, I mean, I certainly, have things that come up that are stressful that, I would have
Sure.
to deal with, but You know, I think my first really important mentor to me when I was a salesperson at Bard, I would be out in the field by myself most of the time, and then he would come in and work with me once every 2 or 3 months. So if I would call him at the end of the day and say, I've got this issue, this challenge, and I'm not sure exactly what I need to do about it. And he'd say, well, what do you want to do about it? So he would always put it back on me to make a decision, take a risk, do what I thought was best to do. And I've just implemented that same philosophy my entire career. So that was, in my early 20s. And now it's, 40 years later, and I'm still doing the same thing. If someone comes to me and says, I've got a problem and I don't know if I should do this or do that, I would just say, well, what do you think you should do? I had a director of marketing come into my office one day who was working very hard on a program, a new product that she was responsible for developing, and she came in with her full slide presentation. This is why I think we should do this, and I'm like, well, if that's what you think, then you're the expert. Just do it. And she was like shocked, and I think it's just because they had been, so they had leaders prior to me that were very directive and telling them how they needed to do something and why they should or shouldn't do anything. So I just really believe in people taking accountability and responsibility. As long as you share what your strategic initiatives are, and then you as a team come up with the goals and objectives together, and then drill that down into each department, then they feel empowered to go ahead and take care of it. And they know I'm depending on them to do that. And I follow up with, in those one-on-ones about every quarter, I will have them make a list of objectives that they need to get done in that time frame. So it all kind of ties together very easily.
You, what you're saying is very convicting to me because it sounds like the leadership I would like to do. and I'm not really good at it. I had a friend of mine in my business group said that good leaders don't let people leave things at their door. And what he would mean is very similar to what you're talking about. He would have people come into his office, and you could tell that their entire mission of this visit was to drop a task off at your desk. And his job as a leader was to redirect and to, no, that task is yours. You need to pick that back up and take that back with you instead of leaving it at my desk. And I find in myself that I am very willing to take the task and without realizing that I just accidentally disempowered that person, because they're coming to me. So I'm thinking, well, they don't think they can do it. And so I'll take it. But that's actually the opposite of probably what they really need. So Gary, I need to get better at that. Not with you per se, just in general, people I care about and who work hard.
Yeah, I can see that being a sticky situation, though, especially with a smaller company, because obviously you cannot have that approach with that many people or as many people as Linda has. But the feeling the need to help and then also trying to empower does seem like a little bit of a gray area, depending on just the communication in that short span of time. So, I mean, that's a trick you're going to have to learn how to master.
Well, it's something
The
I think that
intention
takes
is
practice.
good. Yeah.
Sure. I don't think I've been a leader for only a few years, right? Where I've had a real team rather than a bunch of contractors. And so I'm still very new at that part of it, but that is the goal. And I think every single one of the people who have leadership positions in our company, and I would imagine in all of yours as well, they want you to give it back. They just might not realize it.
Yeah, I think, I don't know if either of you have ever watched New Amsterdam.
I am currently addicted to that show.
Okay.
So thank you for bringing
My
that up.
wife watches it, and I have seen some episodes.
Okay. So
How can I help? It's like I've been bringing that in here.
that's exactly how it works. When someone comes in and they're reviewing their goals with you, and let's say they're getting stuck on one of the objectives, and you say, well, how can I help? And they'll typically tell you, what it is that would help them get that task done. So generally speaking, it's, supporting them by a lot of times when you have those kinds of things, it's because one of their peers that they have to depend on to get their objective completed is either not responding, not making it a priority, not participating at the level they would need to get their initiative taken care of. So, that sometimes is the way to get it done, is to say, I really need some more support from Joe. Okay, Joe, why don't you come along and to the next meeting? How about if I have Joe come or you come to Joe's meeting, and we'll discuss it together and see what, why we're getting stuck on this. And so I really find myself as more of a facilitator a lot of times, just to open pathways for people to get their initiatives taken care of.
I find that I feel like I know I do when I do my job well, I always get that little like celebratory feeling inside, right? I get those most often when someone comes to me with a problem. And generally it's exactly what you said, except in our world, it's not that they're not doing a good job. It's that someone else has stolen them, or they are busy on another part. They were
Sure.
tasked to be somewhere
Sure.
else. And my job is to clear that path, right? Okay, let's move the pieces around so that we can free up that resource that you need. And then I do the little happy dance because I feel like I did my job for a moment. And that's always a very good feeling when you've done that, because you've now just cleared the road, but you didn't break all the other pieces, right? Because only the top person can move the pieces between projects easily. Because really, it's good to be king, right? No one says no when I'm moving the pieces around.
Right.
But you can't break everything in process, right? Or then you're just being a bad leader in general. So it's funny you're saying all the things I want to be when I grow up. So I appreciate that very much.
Well, I'm sure you're doing a fine job. Your business is growing from the podcasts that I've listened to. So that's the first sign of
Just
success.
don't ask Gary. Don't ask Gary how our company's doing. He lies. He's a horrible liar. So one of the things we've been talking about a lot recently is hiring.
Yeah.
And I want to jump into that just for a second, because I think a lot of the people we've spoken to have been too small to have a real good opinion on hiring because they just don't do it enough, right? They have 5 people or less.
Yeah. Or they're early on in the stage of their growth and their startup to where they might not even need to hire anybody beyond just an occasional temporary contractor for a group of tasks, but not like a full-on employee.
What we have found so hard with hiring, this market is so weird right now. Like it defies all. I love finance shows and like Marketplace and all of those, and they all talk about this makes no sense because they're trying to constrict the market so that the economy slows down and jobs slow down and pay rates go down, so everything gets cheaper, right? Because inflation's too high, and so they're putting all their pieces in there and they're using all of their weapons to slow everything down, but no one cares. The job market is still insane and rates are still going up, but inflation is coming down. It's just like no one understands it. And I say all that because hiring is strange, because depending on your industry, some people, there's jobs everywhere, and other people, there are no jobs, right? There are no people. Let me say that again. Like if you're hospitality right now, finding a waiter is impossible.
Yeah, I was going to say hospitality versus tech. There's not enough workers for one, too many for the other.
Well, in dev is always a weird beast because every single one of those people who got laid off have another job if they want one. Right now, they're probably enjoying their severance package, but once they're done with that, they're going to find another job within a day. It's crazy. Mm. But when we put a job out for a project manager or something like that, we get 50 or 80 applications within a week. It's just bam, there they are. But hiring is just a weird time. So with your experience, I mean, you've done the hiring thing way more than I have, or any of us have, and most of our audience. How is that for you? How do you find the right people, even in this crazy market?
So hiring is one of the things that I've probably had, gosh, I've been doing it since 1987. So it's something that I learned. I think what's unique about my experience is that I have both big company and startup. So the big company stuff is good because it gives you sort of a template for how to do things. And then I just try to apply it in my small company worlds when I've done it. So I've been in 2 very, very large companies, and the rest has been startup. And it's kind of a unique position because if you have sort of the templates, okay, in marketing, I need to do these 10 things to be successful. And when you're doing a software, you're making sure you have a good software development life cycle and you know what the steps are to do that. When you're doing R&D, you know that you have to do a proper process, so like a customer focused development and things like that. So that's the nice thing about big companies, is it kind of gives you those templates. And so way back, I started a hiring process where I think what is the most important about it is that you do the same process every interview that you do, as far as if you're talking to 10 different people, that you try to frame it the same way, or else you'll get confused on whether one candidate was much better than the other or not. If you use the same set of questions, then it will give you a barometer that doesn't confuse you as the hiring manager as to which one was stronger. So I like to use a process that, first of all, take me through your resume, tell me, just hit the highlights, what was your big achievement and why you moved on to the next thing. And, sometimes you'll have someone take, 45 minutes just going through that process. And then I question how much focus they have, because if they take that long, then I can't really dig into sort of my questions about them real deeply. And then I like to just have the same set of questions so that I can see how different people deal with those questions. And that really has been and I also go through it, sort of a 3 interview process. Typically I would do a phone interview. The last 30 minutes the first time, just to, and try to do a big enough pool of candidates. Like I like to do probably 16 people through that initial process of that phone interview, and then try to narrow it down to, maybe 10 to do a first face-to-face interview. And then from there, I'm hoping to get down to like 2 or 3 to do the next interview, and then make an offer after that. And I always check my own references, even as a CEO, because there's something about your gut and your intuition that you can't get if someone else checks your references, especially if you're using a recruiter, because the recruiter wants to place the person with you, and they're going to say, oh, their references were great. So, and again, with the references, I try to use a list of questions that are the same list of questions for everybody. And first of all, if you can't get a reference to call you back, that's a bad sign. Secondly, if you say, well, Terry described herself as sort of a superstar, would you use the same characterization? And there's, well, not exactly. Or it just is something about checking your own references. And I always check at least, I ask for 3. And I like them to be a peer, a boss, and, if they've managed people, a subordinate, or a customer. If they're, willing to give you a customer, that's good too.
That's so interesting. You talk about references, and I always joke about references because they're only going to give you nice people who obviously they're not going to give you their worst enemy, right? Their adversary is not the guy you're going to call. So I love the idea that you're asking big old open-ended questions that they have to answer, and you can read a lot about that. The superstar question being the one I'm specifically thinking of. That one is really interesting because eventually they're probably going to say yes, right? Just because this is my buddy and I want to make sure that they get the new job, whatever. But you can tell so much in that answer. It could be, yeah, or it could be, oh, yes, absolutely, superstar, 100%, right? That's a very big difference. Same words, totally different intonation there.
And the same is true for my favorite question at the end is, if you had a position that John had before available, would you hire him again? And if they hesitate, you'd be surprised how many times they hesitate. Then you're like, Or, if they're quick to say, absolutely, no doubt, would hire him in a second. Wish I had a position right now. You can just tell the difference when you're the one asking the questions. Kind of read between the lines. And you can also, yes, people do provide people that they think are going to provide them a good reference, but some of them honestly don't have really good references sometimes. And you can tell by the quality of the reference what their job, what their role is, how successful they've been. If they get 3 people that are just like, Joe on the street, then I don't know why this guy doesn't have so many good references.
I have a question about culture fit. So I'm assuming that you probably want to check for any indications that this person is going to fit within the culture of the company.
Yep.
And I'm guessing that's probably in the later interviews when you're down to the 2 or 3. Do you have any red flags or any kind of, I guess, indications that someone is going to be bad for the company culture?
So statistically, yes, I've hired a lot of great people, really great people. I've also hired some really bad people. I mean, 20% of the time you make a mistake, and you kind of just go, oh, why didn't I pick up on that? Oh, I let them take control of the interview too much, or whatever it was. I dismissed what this reference said, but I shouldn't have, kind of thing. So I think really you say, save that for the end, but I actually try to get that like in the first face-to-face interview. I try to say,
Okay.
my question to really get to that is, so what type of company are you looking for? And if they tell me things that my company can't really provide them, then
Ping pong table, espresso machines.
yeah, exactly. Then you're like, well, we're really not quite there yet. I'm not sure if you're going to be a good fit for the company, because that really is the most important thing. Well, a track record is the most important thing. If they can show that they've achieved a lot of things, then that's the most important thing. But the second thing is, let's say they're coming from a big company and you're hiring in a small company, can they make that shift to having to roll up their sleeves and do a lot more themselves versus, delegating it to someone that we don't have, or using a consultant, or being comfortable in working with consultants and directing consultants and things like that. So I always ask a lot of those questions. Like, most importantly, what kind of company, what are you looking for in a company? And if they list a lot of things that I don't have, I make it very clear. Well, we don't really have that. How do you think you would deal with that? And so I think, if people say, really like I don't really ever talk to my boss. I don't really have meetings with them. And I'm like, oh, well, I'm going to want to meet with you every week. So is that going to be okay? And I want to have a meeting with the group every week. Or, is that gonna work for you? I don't like to meeting out, but I don't think if we're not operating all on the same page, then we're not going to be successful as a team.
I have a question. This is real world. Here we go.
Hmm.
We're in the graduate level category now.
Okay.
So you have a contractor. This is real world. This happened last week. You have a contractor who has royally hosed you,
E.
right? They have lit the fires, dropped their grenades on their way out, whatever they could do, they did, right? They deleted in a critical folder on their way out the door, right? Not something you can easily recover from. They're gone. You have kicked them out of the organization, right? It's not a good fit. You're gone. They dropped the grenades on the way out. Okay. How do you protect the next company, if at all? Because I feel a responsibility, right? I'm the boss. This happened on my watch. They dropped the grenades. We're figuring that out. But now you're out in the real world and you're probably going to do it again because you're a scuzzbucket, right? Do you feel any responsibility for that poor next company who's probably going to get hosed, right? Or do you just let them go? Or is there any recourse in that? Or you just, man, that just stinks.
Generally, you get to the position that you're in or I'm in because you've been successful not only at delivering on things, but you have to be able to deal with people, right? So generally, you're well liked. You don't usually climb up if you're not, pleasing most of the people most of the time and interacting in a positive way. So, even though when you are in a leadership position, people generally assume that you don't need accolades because the job is the accolade, and that you don't like to hear people say, gee, you're the best boss I ever worked for, and things like that.
That never hurts, by the
Yeah.
way.
But I do find um that I do take it personally sometimes if I haven't been successful at building a good rapport with someone. I'm like, I don't know why I have such great rapport with all these other people, but this one, I can't get through to, or, they don't really understand who I am, and I'm extremely transparent. I very, I'm struggling with this. Can you help me with that? Whatever. And um, I'm very direct. Here's your goals. If you're not meeting your goals, I'm going to say, you're not meeting your goals. How can I help you? And I give them a chance. But for whatever, maybe the job's too big for them sometimes. And, I do have to think about that. There have been people that I've been resistant to hire into a position because I thought maybe it would be, too big a job for them. So I'll start them out with a lesser title or lesser responsibility if I'm not sure if it's a big jump for them, and then have them work into it. Just so, I don't want to set them up for failure.
Since you have this experience from giant corporations down to small startups, something we ask every one of our guests that I'm sure you have some insight here for is, what are the 3 pieces of advice that you would give an entrepreneur, a new business, or a startup?
Well, given our most recent discussion here, these final last minutes, I would say, hiring is the most important thing you do. So really take your time, go through a process, hire, as best as you can, because especially in a small company, every single person is important. Second thing I would say, especially in small companies, especially when you're cash strapped, when you make decisions, think about how those decisions impact each part of the organization. But because if you say, I'm going to hire 20 developers, but your project management team is too small to handle it, then you're only going to have a mismatch on how productive those engineers are going to be, as an example. And the third thing I would say is, sales is critical, right? If you don't have sales, you don't have the rest of the organization. And sometimes it takes a bit to get the strongest sales team that you can get. So I would say that if you have a B sales team, even though you're improving it as time goes on, you need an A marketing team or marketing plan. So your marketing has to be exceptional in order to make up for not having all cylinders working for your sales team.
Let me dig into that for a second. Normally I don't jump in, but I want to pick that one a little bit. So what are the practical results if you have a great marketing team, but a meh sales team? What is that marketing team doing for that sales team specifically?
Generating leads.
So better leads are coming down to the B
Yeah,
team?
I think so. And, if they're just really getting, and when I'm talking about marketing, I'm talking about all different facets of marketing,
Mm-hmm.
your website, your search engine optimization, you can get a lot of leads if you have case studies and things that really grab your audience, testimonials, people that will come on and be videoed on your website. Just there's a lot that can be accomplished in the website. You have email marketing, you have, some advertising, depending on, it's probably digital, but anymore, but it's definitely, you need some of that social media. If you're going to be on Twitter and LinkedIn, and you've got to feed it. You can't just post once a month. You've got to post a little more than that, weekly at least, I would say. PR, it's easy to get. I think one of my companies, we got Modern Healthcare's best companies to work in 2 years in a row. So you can reach out to Modern Health. How do I get this? You can create your own awards, PR, trade shows, webinars, executive leadership meetings, user group meetings, touching your customer frequently. Most of your customers, they'll help you get new customers if you engage with them a lot. I would have an annual sort of user group meeting and got so much business as a result of having those user group meetings and just tying up and keeping your customers really committed to you. Blogs, podcasts. I mean, you guys are doing a lot of that stuff, but those things all create solid leads for your sales team. And then, of course, you have to get them to execute, but definitely makes it easier when you have strong marketing.
Nice. Okay, great. Yeah, I mean, I was thinking, I still think, I'm almost wondering, why isn't it the opposite? If you have a B team sales group, or C, even worse, you got this great marketing, they're shoveling the leads, right? They're doing their job. But these, B teamers are like, well, maybe I'll call them, maybe I won't, right? Can the leads really make up for whatevs?
Well, yeah, I mean, so we always used Salesforce.com. You got to track the leads, and then you have to have someone who says, hey, John hasn't followed up on this lead for 30 days, and the lead is hottest in its first days, right? So
Yeah.
if your managers aren't following up on that on a weekly basis, and then the reps know that you're going to follow up, and they're like, oh God, I better go. I could always tell they knew I was going to, check on them every week on whether they followed up on the lead yet or not. And I could tell they called like right before my meeting with them because, yeah, I just talked to them a minute ago. So, I mean, that's just good management. You have to make sure that, you're not wasting those leads. And I also would encourage the CEO to get out in the field and work with people, with the salespeople, and make sure, first of all, it makes it easier for them to get appointments if leadership is with them. And secondly, they need to be prepared, and they need to, be ready to go in and make a call and have an objective in the call. And when you see that and you can share stories, well, John, the other rep, does this. Maybe you should call him and see how he does it, so that then you make your sales team stronger because they're sharing ideas about how they work best and things like that.
All right, Linda. Well, thank you very much for your time today. And if anybody else wants to reach out and learn more about you, what's the best way to get in touch with you?
You can find me on LinkedIn, and pretty good about responding. So that would be a great way.
We'll definitely include that in our show notes as well. So if anybody wants to reach out and get in touch with us, leave any comments or questions, they can do that underneath this video on YouTube, or they can send us an email, hello@thebigpixel.net, or they could reach out on any one of our social media channels. And in the show notes and description for the show, you will have the links that we spoke about, including Linda's link on LinkedIn.
Thank you so much for joining us. This has been a lot of fun.
Thank you, guys. It's been fun for me as well.